Joining us now is Small Business Women Australia CEO Amanda Rose. Amanda, so good to see you. I have to start with the comments from ABC boss Kim Williams, who I think has just embarrassed Australia. He labelled the world's most successful podcaster deeply repulsive after admitting that he's never even bothered listening to the Joe Rogan podcast. Take a listen.
I think people like Mr. Rogan prey on people's vulnerabilities. They prey on fear, they prey on anxiety, they prey on all of the elements that contribute to uncertainty in society, and they entrepreneur fantasy outcomes and conspiracy outcomes as being a normal part of social narrative. I personally find it deeply repulsive.
Just listening to this takes me back to the COVID years, where anyone who has different ideas, wants to ask different questions that doesn't suit a narrative gets shut down, gets labelled as dangerous. And I think it's so arrogant for the boss of the ABC to dismiss Joe Rogan, who has an average audience of 11 million people per episode. Meanwhile, more and more people are just switching off from the ABC. The national broadcaster recorded a 3.5% decline across all platforms in the last financial year. What do you make of all this?
He's very disconnected to the world and what people are wanting to listen to. If anything, the approach should have been, what is he doing that we could look at and potentially learn from? So insulting essentially your competition is not going to work, or insulting someone that you haven't even heard what they have to say, or saying, and I have to say, the irony of saying a media outlet uses fear, most of them do anyway, and they all know that. But really, it's like, this is the future of media. So you can look at other podcasters that are completely different to Joe Rogan as well and say, well, are you going to insult them because they're different to you? No. If you want to talk about inclusivity, and the ABC does talk about inclusivity all the time, then be inclusive. Understand that a lot of people want to hear different topics, different views on different things, and that's okay.
I think that's right. Look, Joe Rogan's responded to the comments saying, lol, what? And billionaire Elon Musk also weighed in, mocking Kim Williams, making a reference to the infamous Soviet Union newspaper in Russia. And I think you're right. There's a reason why Joe Rogan is so successful, why more and more people are choosing to get their news from podcasting platforms as opposed to the ABC.
Well, that's right, because, and like you said, during COVID and other times as well with other topics, if people want to hear from different media outlets and different views, we've been conditioned just to hear the same thing regardless of what channel we turn on. It's like the same messaging. What we want is to hear someone's opposing view maybe, or have a discussion, and that's what we're about. That's what we're about as a society, and the second you stop doing that, you're going to have this group think, and that's dangerous.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think there's really been that demand for podcasting and alternative media after the COVID years, because people were sick of just hearing the same thing on repeat. Look, there are reports that people like Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly could be given a seat in the White House press briefing room, and other journalists could be kicked out. The president-elect's eldest son, Donald Trump Jr., revealed this has been discussed on a recent podcast episode on his show, Triggered with Donald Trump Jr. What do you make of this? Was this something you'd like to see?
I would love to see independent journalists. So, for example, House and Habit with Jessica Krause, I would love to see her participate in that. But I don't think we should kick out the traditional media. I think, again, being inclusive, we need to have all media represented, because you're going to get different perspectives, but also be able to compare perspectives. So you'll know which outlet is either misleading you or, you know, telling the facts, and be able to cross-check. At the moment, we kind of have a group think happening there. What we need is not get rid of the people that are there, but add a different group to it. And I think that'll be very refreshing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Look, the Democrats are still trying to figure out how it went so badly for them in the US election. And Kamala Harris's campaign aides have come out saying that they wanted Kamala Harris to go on the Joe Rogan podcast. They tried and they tried, but they said they couldn't do it because when they wanted to, that's when Donald Trump was in the studio. So, of course, they're finding another reason to blame Trump. Do you think it's true, though? Could you actually imagine Kamala Harris sitting down for a 3-hour podcast with Joe Rogan?
Well, it's very interesting that they think that they blame the entire election on the fact that they didn't do a single podcast and not for the fact that the economy was, struggling and people couldn't pay for their rent and mortgages and pay for food for their family. I think it's just a deliberate attempt to keep a conversation going. And that's what a lot of people do. You got to stay relevant. So they're just trying to find different stories to stay relevant. And a lot of people aren't paying attention, unfortunately, because, well, you know what, news cycle, things move on quickly and everyone's looking at, the Trump administration and getting excited about what changes could be or even fearful of what changes could be. So I think it's just an effort to stay relevant.
There's been a clash on CNN after reports that X is now the most ideologically balanced social media platform. Take a look.
I heard what you're saying about X. I saw a survey this week. It's now the most ideologically balanced user platform.
Scott,
of any platform.
stop. It's too early. I just sat down. I've only been here for 2 minutes.
You're going to be embarrassed when I tweet out after the show, but
you
it's
cannot
true.
say that.
So-
That's not the case.
So
Who's the source of that?
What I find, we reported it on this network. And
It's not accurate, and you know it.
Okay, I'll let you make your statement.
And here is that report on CNN.
Look at this, the party ID among those who regularly use X/Twitter for news. Back in 2022, 65% of those who regularly use Twitter/X for news were Democrats. Just 31% were Republicans. Look at where we are today. Just a completely different picture. Now it's basically split between Democrats at 48%, Republicans at 47%. And what I should note, Mr. Berman, is this new overall makeup matches the overall electorate far better.
Well, there you go. Look, it's interesting left-wing outlets like The Guardian are abandoning X, but it's a platform that's for free speech.
Well, that's interesting because this is what we want. Isn't this what both sides wanted? And this is a classic case of when people don't hear something or they hear something they don't like, they straight away just say, no, it's not true, don't talk about it. No, let's talk about it. And it's great that there is a platform that a survey has shown that it is more balanced because that's what we've all been wanting all along, because too often platforms get overrun by a particular view, and if you have an opposing view, you get attacked, and that's bullying, and that's not being inclusive. And so I just find it interesting that now when people don't get their way or things aren't spoken, yes, it's changed, and it's great that it's changed. And if you don't like X, you have every right to get off it and go to a different platform or not be on social media at all.
Absolutely. And I think, it serves a purpose. And if people want to get outside the echo chamber, if they were so shocked that Donald Trump won the election, maybe they should go on X and follow a few different people with different views. But let's look at the US. The US President-elect Donald Trump has picked a leading COVID lockdown skeptic, Jay Bhattacharya. I don't know if I pronounce his name correctly, but he's going to be the next director of a key US public health agency. And Donald Trump said that he's selected him. He's a Stanford University-trained physician and economist to lead the National Institutes of Health. And of course, this comes after announcing that he wants RFK Jr. to run the US Health Department. So, Amanda, it's certainly a different world now than it was just 4 years ago.
It is. I mean, this is a massive shift that's happening in the US, and I think shifts are needed, especially when the community have actually been crying out for this. I'm always cynical by nature, so I'm the let's see how things go type of attitude. I don't like to be too excited about appointments until I see the actions that they take and whether they are in line of what is right for the people.
Fair point. I want to ask you about what's going on in the UK. So Keir Starmer has dismissed calls for an early general election, despite a petition demanding a second vote, surpassing 2 million signatures. So this petition was launched just over the weekend, and it claims that Labor should face another election just 4 months after their victory, alleging that the party has gone back on promises made before the last election. But 2 million signatures. It's a lot of people certainly unhappy with his leadership.
Yes, and it's like buyer beware, right? And this is why I always say, before you vote for someone, don't vote for them because you despise the current sitting Prime Minister or politician that's currently there, or president, right? Actually look at the person you're voting for. What is their track record? What do they support? Because regardless of what they promise you in the moment and you're emotional, they're going to do what they've always done. So you've got to really dig deep, and it takes a lot of effort, and politicians are very good at propaganda, but you've got to do your homework, because now what's happened is they've gone back on a lot of things. They've made decisions that the people that voted for them didn't like, and they've said, hang on a minute, we don't want you anymore. But this is what happens when you don't do your research.
Amanda Rose, Small Business Women Australia CEO, thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour.
Thank you.